Pianist Althea Waits, welcome to Cultural Attaché.
Thank you.
So, you were one of the earliest proponents of the music of Florence Price, recording her work, I believe, in 1987. Did you imagine all that time ago that Florence Price would become one of the most performed composers in this decade?
Actually, I really did not. A lot of times, I think you're probably aware of this from your own work. You start out on a project, but you don't really know how it's all going to end. And I did it was like a cassette recording. Of course, now we're not using cassettes anymore, but a friend of mine who did the first biography on Price sent me a copy of the manuscript from the Library of Congress. And I got it because I was in Switzerland a couple of years back, and she said, "Oh, Althea, this would be a wonderful piece for you to learn." Well, I didn't know anything about the Price Sonata or any of the other music, and so I got the manuscript and started working on it. And when I got back to the States, I made that a primary project. And then, of course, in 1993, I did the first commercial recording of the sonata along with some other short pieces that Price had composed.
Why do you think now is the time that Price has suddenly been embraced by major orchestras around the world and also soloists?
Well, I think probably because of all of the interest, I just have to bring up something that's been in the news and of course, a part of everything that's going on. We've been talking a lot and experiencing a lot about diversity and inclusion. And I have to say that given the fact that I'm old enough to remember growing up in the segregated South, where music was being performed and it was a part of the cultural landscape, but certainly Black composers, performers were relegated to very limited kinds of opportunities. And now all of that with the civil rights movement, I have to bring that up, all of the LGBTQ uh, actions that are taking place now, there is interest in Florence Price's music. And as a result of all of that and what happened with me, in the 80s and in the early 90s, now there's a lot of interest in it. And of course, she was really, she had to go through an awful lot. I mean, she was not recognized back in Chicago at that time. I mean, there was racism going on all over the country, really, if you want to get right down to it. So I think that,
Sadly, there still is.
oh yeah, there is. It's not something that disappeared overnight. No,
No, I don't think it's going to disappear in either of our lifetimes, unfortunately.
I totally agree with you with that.
Now, you'll be performing at the Nimoy as part of Cap UCLA's season, and I assume you'll be celebrating your album Reflections in Time that came out last year, which features a lot of music by Margaret Bonds, who
Mhm.
was I believe, a student of Florence Price's.
Yeah, they were close friends. They lived together for a short period of time, and of course, Bonds was emerging as a major artist. She got degrees from Northwestern University back in the I think it was the late 20s, and so they knew each other, and they were very, very close in terms of their work.
Now, in 2021, I believe it was Classic FM had a list of the 10 most important Black composers who changed the course of classical music history. And there were
Mhm.
only two women on the list, Florence
Mhm.
Price and Margaret Bonds. From your perspective, what do you think their greatest contribution to classical music is?
Well, I would say that they kind of paved the way for traditional, I have to say, traditional folk music that had been part of the Black experience to be included and to be recognized as a major component of what that particular type. But of course, now here's the other thing: they were not entirely uh, away from doing European classical music or the art music, the music of Mozart, Bach, Beethoven, etc. And because they were classically trained, they incorporated all of that into their music. Of course, Price used the dances of that came out of slavery and out of the music of the plantations in the South. Bonds did the same thing. Although, again, because of their classical experience, they also merged that particular form with everything else that they were doing. And I think that that was their major contribution, because really, before they came along, I don't know that there were a couple of male composers like James Reese Europe and maybe William Grant Still, who was around at the same time, doing things like that. A lot of other people from the, I have to use the term, white side of the spectrum said, well, this is not significant, it's not important. And so they were really, their voices were silenced for a long time. But I think now, again, even though, like you said, I totally agree with you that there's racism in the way that a lot of this is done, they are becoming a lot more important in terms of the contributions that they made. And they paved the way for other women. They opened doors really for women at that time. And of course, even in my generation, to get out and play and perform and teach a lot of this music. Both Price and Bonds were teachers and fierce advocates for inclusion at a time when it was hardly popular.
Now, you're talking about teaching in a formal, you know, facility, teaching, students either through an institution or on their own, et cetera. You're also a teacher as well. But don't you think the act of performance is a lesson in teaching for anybody who gets to hear it?
Oh, I certainly agree. I totally agree. Yeah, you can learn a lot, as I did, just from listening to great artists, and of course listening to it on the radio, television. I mean, a lot of my education, besides going to an academic institution and doing all that stuff, getting fulfilling degree requirements and on and on and on. I went to concerts. My mother was a fierce advocate for having me experience all of that music. And we went to concerts in New Orleans, despite the fact that the large halls were not open to us. We heard the Met Opera every Saturday afternoon at 1 o'clock. After I had my lesson, she would turn on the radio and say, now it's time for the opera, Althea. And of course, when I was old enough to read, I would get the scores and follow along with whatever was going on. So teaching can happen in many ways, not just in a classroom. I mean, you can experience music on the street. I mean, you can listen to it, you can read about it. And so a lot of my education happened that way.
You were talking about the way these two women in particular, used, slavery songs and folk
Mhm.
traditions and things like that. As a pianist, Rhapsody in Blue offers a tremendous opportunity for any soloist to show off what they can do.
Mhm.
But is it a complicated work?
Well, I wouldn't say so much that it's complicated, but what Gershwin did was to use the jazz influence, which was all there, really basically from the early the 1900s on. And he tried to capture a lot of that. I've played Rhapsody in Blue with orchestra, and I love the experience that I had with it. I give full credit to Gershwin for doing that. Got to remember too that the composers who used jazz idioms and styles, I have to think about Stravinsky, Ravel, Debussy, and they were, it was being heard in Europe, and there were a lot of Black musicians who were emigrating to Paris and to Germany, and of course they heard the music, so there was no way that they could avoid, or shall I say that they were excited and intrigued by it, and they incorporated that into their music. But going back to what you were saying about that, Rhapsody in Blue has always been it's a classic piece now, and everybody wants to play it. I mean, I had the experience of doing it in 2008 at Disney Hall, and it was wonderful. Complicated in the sense that you have a lot of virtuoso effects, that you have to capture when you're doing the piece, like the Concerto in F, which is also another big piece that Gershwin wrote. So I was glad to have the opportunity to do it, but in some ways it is complicated because it's a virtuoso piece. It is not something you can just pick up and sight read. You know what I mean?
Right, but I meant, is it complicated by virtue of the accusations that Gershwin stole?
Oh, that he stole from who knows? It could be. I have to I have to go back a little bit. all of this stuff again was out in the open, and I'm just trying to think. It could very well have been that maybe he found some things that he could use in the piece. It's hard for me to go back and look at and say, well, maybe that's something that he should not have done, or that he should have tried to create it on his own, because jazz was, of course, in the air and certainly being heard throughout the United States. It was one of the most popular, art forms. So if he did that, or if he's been accused of that, then I would have to regret, you know, having to say that it became one of the big landmark pieces that almost every pianist on earth, including Bernstein and anybody else that we can name, they all played it. You might say the same thing about Porgy and Bess. It's another opera that has some controversy behind it. Who knows? He might very well have done that. I don't have any information about it, so I don't want to pass on information that I don't know anything about. But it's out there. He could have
Right.
very well done that.
Right now, Margaret Bonds, there you can't find a lot of quotes by Margaret Bonds. In fact, almost none. But I
Mhm.
did find one where she is quoted as having said, "Music has to be human, and people have to like it. It has to move them spiritually and intellectually." Do you agree with her? And how does her music move you?
Well, yeah, I do agree. I mean, I think when you get past playing the right notes at the right time. I mean, we as musicians, we all have to do that, right? But the whole idea of that is that people want to be moved by whatever it is that you do, whether you're a pianist, or if you play any, or if you're a singer or whatever. And if you cannot bring the emotional content to the experience that you have with your instrument, whatever that is, then I'll say that you've come short. You've fallen short of what your mission is. I think the primary mission, I just have to say that, is to move people emotionally, so that when they walk out of the space, they say, wow, I heard something that really was special, and I was really touched by that. And that has happened to me on many, many occasions. I expect the musician to have the skills and all of the other things that they bring, the training, whatever that is. But if I walk out and I say, okay, so what was that all about? And I don't get that reaction but then I feel a little, I feel a little frustrated. So as far as what you mentioned about that, yeah, the Margaret Bonds is right. I agree with everything that you said about that. It has to be human, and it should be designed to move people emotionally in whatever way they feel. I mean, I left Othello, the LA Opera production, and at the end, because both Othello and Desdemona, they die, and I was almost in tears at the way they did it, and I thought, wow, this is real, and to see how he was just really, really tortured by Iago, in the entire opera, and then you realize at the end he believed all the stuff. And I walked out thinking, gee, what would have happened if he had turned against Iago and said, you're a liar and you're corrupt? And well, obviously it didn't end like that. But yeah, I've had a lot of experiences that way, where I really leave the hall or the space, or listening to something on the radio and feeling a bit, really touched by what I have heard.
Does the music need to move you in order for you to play it?
Yes, I think so. And I'm having that experience now with a couple of the things that I'm doing. There is a piece by Frederick Jeffsky, who was one of the primary exponents of social justice. He used a lot of those themes in his work. And he wrote a piece called Down by the Riverside, starting with that folk song, Gonna Lay Down My Burden, and so on. And then, of course, in the middle of the piece, it goes south. He takes a radical departure from the tune that you hear, which is very peaceful and all of that. And all of a sudden, you're thrown into another world. That was the way he thought about it. And of course, at the end, he brings all of that material back, the traditional tune. So, yeah, there's something in it, in any piece, that has to resonate with me. Otherwise, what's the point? I mean, I don't need to play things that just deal with notes, and nothing else. And if I don't feel anything on the inside, then I can't really bring what I have from my own experience to interpret that music.
as one of the earliest advocates of Florence Price's music, I assume that you are as vital and as engaged as you are because you're still endlessly curious. You
Yes.
know, are there other discoveries that you've been making about contemporaries of Florence Price or Margaret Bonds or other Black composers, male or female, that maybe haven't gotten the acknowledgement that they should?
Yeah, I think to a large extent, yes. One of the things about being a musician, or at least being involved in the making of art, I feel it's very important for me not to just isolate myself. I mean, I don't practice for 10 hours a day and sit at my piano and that's all I do. I mean, I really try to go out and talk to people about all kinds of things. And it has really made a profound difference. I was thinking there are some young composers that I have had the opportunity to meet with, and they're all doing, I think, very exciting and very interesting things. Jean-Baptiste, I never met him, but he's writing music that is absolutely stunning. Terence Blanchard, who's had an opera. I think he has another production that's coming up. He did Champion and Fire Shut Up in My Bones with the Met. Well, it only took the Met 125 years to get a Black composer to produce anything on their stage. But, again, I met Terence Blanchard a couple years back, and here's my Anthony Davis, someone else, not a young, I'd say a middle-aged composer, but again, who is now getting recognition because of his work. I had the honor of playing piano part in a piece called Restless Morning about the 9/11 attacks for Jack Arrienda, an organization that was based in Santa Monica. And I learned a lot just from talking to him about his own work and what he experienced that day, because he was affected by that as well. So yeah, I've had that opportunity to get out and talk to composers, not only here in California, but all over the place, throughout the country and throughout the world.
Yeah, and you've also got Chris Bowers here in the LA area as well,
Yes.
who's doing some really terrific work.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the legacy that Bonds and William Grant Still and Price have done. They have created a path now for all of these the younger generation of composers and artists to explore and to change the way we think about African American music, culture, all of that. It really is it's a big breakthrough, and I couldn't be happier to be involved in it.
Do you consider yourself a trailblazer, somebody who's made it possible for younger generations, who come up behind you to explore and make discoveries on their own of music, whether known or unknown?
Well, I don't want to pin any bouquets on myself. I mean, a lot of people have called me that, oh, Althea, you're a pioneer and you're doing great work. I mean, I say thank you. I appreciate that. What I have, what I believe is that whatever I have done in some small way, I continue to keep doing that because I figure, hey, whatever time I have left on the planet, I'm going to continue to support the younger generation. But I don't know if I would call myself a trailblazer, although some people have used that to refer to me. It's nice to be thought of in that context, but for me, it's basically just doing the work, doing some good work.
Right now, as I'm sure you know, there was a major discovery in Chicago in an apartment building that was being, remodeled, or a house that was being remodeled, where they found a lot of Florence Price's music, which helped further people's awareness of Florence Price. And I'm not sure that we've heard or seen all of that music just yet. But there are so many other composers, Betsy Jackson King, Irene
Yes.
Britton Smith, Helen
Mhm.
Hagen. Much of their work has been lost. What do you have optimism that maybe another miracle can occur and that we can find a lot of this lost work somehow, somewhere?
I would think so because people are really interested in it now. And I do have to bring up at this juncture some work that a friend of mine, Michael Cooper, who is now completing the first biography on Margaret Bonds. And it was through him that I got these pieces that I'm going to premiere for the Nimoy concert. He is a real trailblazer because Bonds, lived in Los Angeles during the last 6 7 years of her life after Langston Hughes passed away. And Michael has been going in, he's doing research on where some of this music was. And I have a feeling that it's going to happen with Price. He is also editing a lot of the music of Florence Price, and he sends me things all the time about what he is working on. So I really am so grateful. I owe him a great debt of gratitude, because had it not been for him, I would not have known that these pieces existed, to be honest.
Right.
So
Now, on Reflections in Time, you sandwich music by Bonds and Samuel Coleridge-Taylor with music by Jeremy Siskind, a modern composer.
mhm.
What is the conversation you're having amongst these three composers?
Well, I wanted to show a contrast in styles. You know, I look at Reflections in Time as an eclectic album, because it's not I'm trying to think of a word. It's not like, okay, it's all Bach, Chopin, Mendelssohn, Rachmaninoff, all, great composers, Mozart. I mean, I play works by those composers as well. But I was trying to show, I think, a contrast with Coleridge-Taylor's music. He's not around, but those pieces were rarely heard. I mean, I think he wrote a set of 6 waltzes, and they've been recorded. But again, I went out and called a friend of mine. Do you know anything about these waltzes? Sure enough, she sent me copies of the pieces, and then I went to another website called Performers Edition, and I got the copies and learned the pieces. So that kind of stuff comes up all the time. And I wanted to show the contrast, if you will, between, let's say, Siskind's music. He's a jazz pianist, but he uses classical elements in a lot of his writing, and he's amazing. He really is. And that was my purpose in showing the connection between, okay, Bonds, who was, who preceded everybody, and her music, of course, is still timeless. But I wanted to show the difference between those, and to bring them all together by showing here's a variety of styles, utterly romantic music that it has a jazz influence, and then straight ahead things that need to be heard, like the pieces of Margaret Barnes.
Now, you haven't recorded a lot of albums, unfortunately, at least that I'm aware of.
Yeah, this is my fourth.
Right. So I'm only aware of Black Diamonds and Along the Western Shore,
Mhm,
in addition to obviously Reflections in Time.
mhm.
But when you look back at the 4 albums, and I'm sorry that I don't know the fourth, what is the journey you see about who you have become over the course of your recording career?
Well, part of the mission with recording, I do have to say that I got a lot of support from Cambria Records. I did those first 2 that you mentioned, the Black Diamonds, which is a kind of a landmark work, and then Western Shore, where I did again a lot of pieces that had not been heard. And I think for me, it was a journey of figuring out what kind of musician do I want to be? Do I want to play only uh, the music of Bach, the music of Rachmaninoff, or Grieg, Harry, anybody you want to name from the Western canon? Or do I want to have another kind of experience? And I think because of that and the support I got from friends saying, why don't you just explore this and see what happens? The other issue with recording, I have to say, is finding either an organization or getting money to physically just to do it. So I'm no longer with Cambria, but I got a grant from another organization to do Reflections in Time. And when I did the other album that was not mentioned, it was called Celebration. I was able to work at Cal State Long Beach when I was teaching there. And so I had access to their pianos and the recording guys who were very gracious. I paid them, but you know what I mean? That was a kind of thing that just happened because I felt like I needed to do that. And it's a whole album of music by American composers, along with the work that was written for me. So the limitations really come with how do you finance it? I think that's the primary consideration. And you don't want to do it uh, in a way that does not represent everything at high quality. I mean, that's the state of the art now, as you know. I mean, you can't, I can't record something in my living room on my piano and say, okay, I'm going to sell this. You've got to have the right technicians behind you. It's got to be mastered, all of that stuff, album cover design, blah, blah, blah. So that was that was something that really happened, fortunately for me, with Yamaha. We were able to get into their studios out here in Buena Park, and I recorded on a disklavier, which is a device, that allows all kinds of adjustments to be made. And I was really excited about that. That was my first time using it. And my son-in-law, who is a producer and a musician and a composer, he worked all of this out. Had it not been for him, I don't think I would have been able to do it, because I obviously couldn't do it by myself. So you need a lot of support. I say all that to say that anytime you do a recording, you got to think about state of the art. What is it now? And anything that you put out with your name on it has to be done with those high quality elements, in place.
It also has to reflect where you are at this point in your life too, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. I mean, I'm not getting any younger. I was telling my daughter the other day, I'm never going to be 25 again, and that's okay. I have to do a lot of things now that reflect where I am. I mean, I'll be 85 at the end of this month, and I'm grateful to be able to still go on. I mean, I haven't had any major health crises, thank goodness, and that's all. It's all good. But a lot of that is because I'm aware of the fact that, okay, my body is changing, and I have to do more now to stay in good shape. So I walk, and I have a lot of exercises that I do, and I don't sit at the piano for 10 hours anymore, not that I ever do, but you know what I mean? I practice, but I do get up and take my breaks and with tea and things like that. And the exercises really help, because if not, if you're not doing anything like that, then you really can't present your best self to an audience.
I would also argue that music is a really great way of staying alive.
Oh, goodness, yes. Well, we need it now more than ever. I mean, I think with all the stuff that's going on, which, we don't have to go into, but I mean, the whole world is in a very agitated state. There's a lot of horrible stuff that's going on. And music is, I think, probably one of the most important tools. I mean, you can bring people together with that. And it's not that you have to say anything, but you can speak through your music. And I think that that's what Price and Bonds attempted to do. When Bond says music has to be human, and it has to move people emotionally, which is absolutely right. I couldn't agree more with what you had to say about that.
And that's what you're able to do by performing the music.
For sure. Yeah, I'm grateful. I mean, every time I sit down, I think, wow, I found another little thing here. What about that? She put fingerings into one of the pieces, and I thought, oh, gee, she thought enough about it to do that, because she was a concert pianist. And so I have great respect for the way she laid those things out. And she taught, that was one of the things she did in order to earn a living, besides playing jazz in the clubs and, doing all of that. So, yeah, I feel very, very grateful now to still be able to do this at this point in my life. Anybody else would be sitting in a rocking chair watching soap operas, but not for me.
Of course. Well, I want to conclude by asking you one more thing, Althea.
Sure.
We live in the classical world. It seems like people want to hear sort of the same things over and over again. Like they can't get enough of Beethoven symphonies, right?
Mm.
So they're incredible works. Um, or last year was Rachmaninoff anniversary, so there was Rachmaninoff everywhere, and that's all good. But what do you think the most important thing we as an audience can get from opening ourselves up to music we don't know, to opening ourselves up to composers maybe we've heard of but we haven't heard their music?
Well, I think for what you were saying about, can't get enough about of Beethoven. And I mean, I think the Beethoven symphonies are monumental. I mean, everything that he wrote, and I still play that music. But going back to new music, I think what has to happen with audiences is, don't uh let's say, get rid of the fear, if you will. I have to put that in, or the apprehension that you may have in your mind about, well, I'm not going to like this. If you come in with the notion that, oh, this is not something that I'm really going to like, well, you don't know until you try until you actually have the experience. And something I do a lot of that in the workshops that I do. I talk about just plunging in and not allowing the fear or the lack of, well, I don't know if I want to do that. I may not like. Well, you don't know until you try it, until you go out and listen to it. So audiences I have to really, I think, do more, and I think we should do more as artists to make that cause, to say, here is something new. It's not going to attack you, or bring down nails on your head. It's really, but give you an example. Omar, the opera that Rhiannon Giddens and won the Pulitzer. Okay, now I read the trailer. I mean, I looked at the trailer and all of that. Well, I didn't know anything about this character, this person who actually lived. But I thought, well, okay, I'm gonna go see the production, and by golly, the music center was packed with college students, young people, and there was standing room only for the afternoon that I went. It was amazing, and a lot of folks walked out saying, "I never knew," and they were all, you could see that they were really touched by everything that they had seen. It was a great production. So again, somebody said, well, it's the first time I've been in the music center. I said, well, where have you been? Well, I never thought I could go down there. I said, what do you mean you never thought you could go? This is not something for the elite or for people who can pay $300 to sit in Founder's Circle. I mean, anybody can go in, So I think for the people who were there, they had a rewarding experience. And so more has to be done with that. I mean, I feel that that's part of my mission, to get people in the space to say, come on in. It's not what you think. Try it. You probably will like it. And at least that's where I am. And I think a lot of the people that I have worked with are doing that, trying to get people out to listen.
Well, I'm confident that the people who come out to listen to you perform at the Nimoy are also going to have a great experience,
I hope so.
as I have with this conversation.
Thank
So
you.
thank you very much for your time, Althea. Have a great show at the Nimoy and have a great birthday at the end of the month.
Oh, thank you so much. And thanks for the interview.